Hello to everyone who's just joined us. Welcome to The Big Shrink with myself, Ash King, and founder and head psychologist of the Indigo Project, Mary Hoang. We're going to be talking all things that are going on inside our heads, inside our hearts, and out in our world today. Mary, tell me about how your week's been.
I've been in therapy with my inner critic this week, actually for a couple of weeks. So I'm currently in the third edit of my book, and it's been a pretty painful journey, I've got to say. I'm really trying my hardest to deal with the thoughts of like not being good enough, just the criticisms around like, does this sound right? I'm getting obsessed with sentences and paragraphs and going over and over and over in my head about them. And I'm really just learning how to like really notice those thoughts come up and to apply a bit of a healing balm towards it, which is a bit of self-love, just a bit of understanding. It is, I've got some pretty tough short deadlines. So yeah, at the moment, it's just a huge lesson in just being kinder to myself, which I think, I think that's a lesson that we're all kind of working on all the time.
Absolutely. And it must be hard as well, because I guess we are kind of taught as we grow up that those sort of critical voices are what helps us do better work. I'm like, yes, you need to be absolutely thrashing yourself half to death to be able to write this book half decent. And yet we still need that beautiful sort of tenderness to ourselves too, hey?
Well, I think I've achieved so much in my life from the inner critic just whipping the shit out of me. But, I think there comes a time when I've just been noticing like a lot of patterns of being burnt out. So I'll like whip myself into a frenzy and, I'll achieve lots of things, but then I'll just feel really drained and burnt out afterwards. And so this has become a cycle that I'm really trying to notice now that I've got this big project on my hands, and really just trying to take more breaks and step away from it and get a bit more perspective around just myself, and how I'm actually doing in this process. Yeah. So, I'd hate to say that sometimes it has some of its advantages, but I think I can be motivated by a kind of voice which says like, you can do this. You've obviously been you've been doing this for 10 years, and now it's just a different way of translating some of the teachings to a bigger audience. So I don't know. Wish me luck.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're all rooting for you, Mary. It's going to be so good, and I can't wait to read it. But I know the feels. My inner critic has showed up this week in telling me that I'm a terrible person because of how many times I've ordered Uber Eats. So I feel like it needs to be there. I need to be shamed so that I can stop. Because what I do is I still will still do the groceries, and then it'll come to the evening where I need to eat, and I'll just convince myself that any other food that I could possibly eat that night is revolting and disgusting, and I need sushi delivered to my house. That's how I'm feeling.
Oh,
So
that's probably not a terrible thing, right?
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
maybe
Well, it
maybe
gets
I
pretty
need.
deep. Yeah, I mean, like if I were to get into the depths of the therapy process recently, I mean, the inner critic comes from a really deep place where sometimes we're not even conscious of why it's telling us the things that it's telling us. But mine go all the way back into high school, trying to get like the best result in my final year, trying to be, trying to be the best and, outperform everyone. And that comes from pressure, that I've had from my family for a long time too. So, I might be 30 something years old, but I think sometimes I'm still acting like a 14-year-old who's like trying to get the attention and love and from people around me.
Yeah, in part, I think it's kind of nice to be a little bit of the sassy and desperate 14-year-old that some of us all are deep down, myself included. I tell you what else I've also been copying hard this week is some really like crazy fucked up dreams. And lots of people have been talking about experiencing that. I don't know if any of you guys who are watching at the moment are getting crazy dreams too, but it's almost like I don't always remember them that well, and they often don't make any sense whatsoever. But I'll wake up with this real feeling like I've been lots of places and I've done lots of things
Totally.
in sleeping, and it's a very bizarre.
Well, just think about it. I mean, I think we're running away a lot from our feelings and thoughts and suppressing a lot of them. So where else are they going to come out but in our dreams? And you know, it's I've been having dreams that I'm in a conference room with lots of psychologists and they're all judging my work. Fucking horrible.
Your book comes out, is released every night as you sleep.
Oh, it's so intense. Yeah, it is a huge reminder just to like step away from it and get some perspective. But you know, our heads. I'm calling them the monsters in our heads.
Yeah, they're like really smart, switched on monsters that seem to be dedicated to bringing us down at all costs.
Well, actually a really interesting thing that I've been exploring in the book is this idea that the monsters in our heads, like our thoughts, kind of have monsters in their heads as well. And that is the idea of our unconscious, or this kind of like subconscious mind, which we're not really, don't have a lot of access to, but is influencing how we think, feel, and behave. So gosh, you know, it's a little bit of a mind fuck. I think, you know, we're like on one level like, okay, well, how do I deal with my thoughts, my feelings, and my behaviors? But you know, we can't just deal with them in a superficial way by saying, I'm just going to change my bad thoughts, I'm going to shift my negative feelings, I'm going to change my negative behaviors to good ones. Because gosh, we've all been there before, where we've tried to start exercising every month. You know, every Monday is the new time to get fit and healthy. But unless we deal with the underlying stuff that's holding us back from moving forward, the monsters in our heads, monsters, thoughts, then, you know, that's the challenge, I think.
It must have been what the old geologists felt when they were like digging into the earth, and they must have been like, finally, we found the center. And then they are like, oh shit, no, there's more, and I have to keep going. It would have just been absolutely insane. They would have just thought, finally, this has got to be the middle. But I don't know if we ever find the middle of
Yeah,
ourselves.
we're just endless onions, and every part that we peel, we just end up crying a little bit more.
Deep and tragic. All right, on that note, let's go over to our mental wellness topics. So these are our topics every week that we're chatting about, things that are affecting our mental health, affecting our well-being, and maybe how we can give them a bit of a spin to see if we can get them to work for us. So the first topic was one that was submitted by one of our members of our Get Your Shit Together online community. So Get Your Shit Together is our online course that's available on our website. We have an awesome online community where people discuss, you know, going through the trials and tribulations of the course and learning about themselves on the way. And we had someone ask about isolation. So last week we spoke about being in a relationship or being in relationships while we're on our own. But then there's also, like on the other side, the challenge of being alone while all this is going on, and how that can leave us with real feelings of sort of disconnection and loneliness. What do you reckon, Mary?
Yeah, I think, you know, if we kind of step back and talk about the concept of loneliness itself, because I think there's a lot of myths or kind of perceptions that we have about loneliness, where loneliness is something that happens when you're old or you're elderly. Loneliness is something that happens when you don't have any friends, or you're a loner, or you don't have good social skills. So I think the first thing, you know, is to recognize that loneliness is something that we all feel. You know, we can be in a crowd of friends and still feel lonely. We can be in a relationship and feel lonely. So I think this chat is really kind of, I think we're able to speak to people who are living alone, as well as people who, you know, may have people around them as well. So I've done a little bit of research into loneliness for the book, and what's been really interesting is to understand that loneliness is an adaptive response. So it's something that has actually been preserved over the centuries of our evolution. And things that get preserved are things that actually help us. So I think that typically, we think of loneliness as something that is really negative. something that we tend to push away, something that we want to get rid of. And I think there's a little bit of a stigma to loneliness as well. And what we need to recognize is that, you know, loneliness is a signal. If we think about signals that we have you know, and kept over the years through our evolution, signals like, for example, hunger, thirst, these are signals that we would typically not ignore, you know, be like, okay, well, we just accept them. And then we go, okay, well, let's go get some food or let's have something to drink. And so I think it's really important that we first of all recognize that this is a signal that we need to listen to and to attend to, as if it was like a twig in the eye or something. You know, it's something that we actually need to pay attention to. And what loneliness is actually calling us to do is to actually connect with others. Now, obviously, this is, you know, a bit of a challenge right now, but I think, you know, with most things that we talk about, our ability to become self-aware and to accept some of the feelings that we're having is often, you know, so much, you know, that's where the power is we are learning how to become more self-aware and to accept ourselves. And loneliness is one of those things that when we become aware of it, we can say, okay, well, it's not about me not having any friends. It's, you know, it's not about me, you know, necessarily being isolated from others. What it is that it's a subjective perception that your needs are not being met by others. And so a subjective perception is like, this is a perception that you hold yourself, and that needs such as emotional security, safety, connection is not being met by the relationships that you currently have. And so if anyone, you know, if anyone has been hurt in the past, they've been isolated, they've been rejected in their relationships, what actually happens is that we become even more sensitive to looking for forms where we are being rejected by others again. So we've kind of got this hypersensitivity. And I think in isolation and the difficulty in actually being able to see each other, and now we're just texting or we're Zooming and we're FaceTiming, I think there's a lot that may be kind of picked up that can contribute to kind of re-triggering some of those, you know, those fears that we have that people aren't meeting our needs. But again, this is, you know, when we think about the concept of thoughts, you know, not all thoughts are real or true. And this is the ability for us to be able to examine some of those thoughts, like what needs are you feeling are not being met by the people around you, and how can we learn how to ask, you know, ask for support, ask for our needs to be kind of seen by others, and how can we also meet them ourselves as well, because this is also talking about connection within ourselves too. Does that make sense? That was a very long-winded answer.
No, it was good. It was the sort of answer we needed, I think. I do think that there's a lot of stuff that goes on with loneliness that we kind of do have preconceptions over. And also that idea that that we read into the lines a lot more without sort of, I guess, body language. And even now you and me are communicating and we're seeing each other's faces, but we're not able to look each other straight in the eye. We're not able to see like how we're leaning in towards one another or not, where our arms are. So a lot of those signals we're not picking up on, and, you know, like afterwards we could like turn this off and I could go into like an anxious rage and go, oh, like, what if Mary was crossing her arms at me? You know what I mean? So totally. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I actually think that it really does take us into this next topic, which is the difference between distraction and immersion. So the question of like, when we, you know, say maybe we do spend, you know, a fair bit of time chatting to friends online or organizing, you know, like Zoom calls with a bunch of friends, you know, at what point are we doing these things? Or maybe even like baking. There was a really good, here, let me read this tweet that I read that was funny. My favorite part of quarantine is that we are all forced to be alone with our thoughts for a little bit. And everyone was like, absolutely not. I will learn to bake bread from scratch.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so and so, like, you've mentioned about how baking is something that's been really supportive and helpful to you, and I also like binge watch British crime procedurals, and I feel like that's a great outlet for me as well. But at what point, I guess, is it that we're just doing all of these things so that we don't have to sit and be present with ourselves?
Well, I think you brought up an interesting point because, people might be saying, well, is this behavior a, something that is a distraction, or is this a behavior something that's taking me away from myself? And I don't think it's like the behavior necessarily, whether it's baking, whether it's talking to friends, whether it's like having a drink or eating food or whatever it is that we use, to either cope with our emotions or distract ourselves from our emotions. It's not the behavior in itself. I think it is the kind of intention that is behind it. So when we talk about emotions, emotions are brief responses that affect how we feel, and affect the sensations in our body. They affect our thoughts and they affect our behavior. So when we have certain emotions, and if we were to check in with them, we would notice that when we're not feeling so great, we tend to have like tension and heaviness, and those kind of feelings of like anxiety and tightness in our bodies. And when we feel happy, we tend to feel kind of more light and space, and we feel different in our bodies. We feel like kind of tingly and happy if we were to check in with them. So this idea of avoidance is, if we kind of go into the real heart of it, is when we avoid our emotions, essentially what we're avoiding are the unpleasant sensations that we're feeling in our bodies. So when we talk about what is immersion and what is distraction, so an immersion into our emotions requires that we are starting to develop some self-awareness around what the sensations are in our bodies and what they're telling us and how they feel. And when it comes to distraction, we're like trying to get away from them. So what I usually do with my clients is, before they reach for the snack or their phone to text someone, something that is maybe they're finding that they're doing habitually, and just to check in with their bodies and to check in to see what emotions they're feeling at that time, and to understand and to get a sense of perspective around whether they're trying to get away from something. So it kind of comes down to intentionality, and it comes down to learning how to slow down and to really ask ourselves, well, what am I feeling? Like when I grab my phone, am I feeling okay? Am I just like, do I just want to kind of check in and send a friend a text, or am I looking to get away from this assignment that I'm doing, or this project, or this work that I'm doing? And it just takes that moment for us as individuals to check in with ourselves at that moment, to understand why we are doing what we are doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think also what I might find tricky at times, and maybe some other people do too, is understanding exactly what it is that I might need, because not all emotions are as easy as like a smiley emoji and a sad emoji and an angry emoji. It's kind of like like we were just talking about loneliness. It's quite a different type of feeling, and people tend to, I guess, embody it in different ways. And so, you may be feeling quite lonely and maybe don't want to, I guess, confront that, as maybe you are someone who has a lot of connections and lots of friends, and people do reach out to you and this and that, and then you have to go, well, actually, I do think that I'm feeling lonely, and I feel like I'm distracting myself from acknowledging that.
Yeah, I completely resonate with that, because it's actually something that I'm working on at the moment. Is I have a lot of people around me, people who are checking in on me, but there's a part of me also which maybe doesn't feel deserving of that. And then when I actually check in with my needs, there's this conflict, because when I check in with my needs and I'm like asking myself, okay, well, what do I need? there's one level of my consciousness which is saying, I'm fine, I don't need anything, I'm good. And then if I sink into it, there's a part of me that really needs connection. And I think sometimes we kind of swirl around this kind of top, very superficial layer of our thoughts. But I think when we connect with the body, and we can even ask sensations in our body, or we can say, we can talk to our anxiety, or we can kind of talk to the heaviness or the tightness in our throat and say, you know, what is the message that's here for me? And do you have anything to tell me? And what do I need? I think we can really sink into a kind of deeper level of conversing with ourselves, that allows us to really understand what is the kind of deeper needs that we have.
It's like you got like an inner psychic almost, or like, I don't know, or like an inner wisdom. I suppose, you know, people have different names for it. And if you have a particular religion that, you know, you're associated with, you might think of it as something like God or the universe. But the fact that it's sort of inside us, and if we can manage to get a dialogue going with it, like that's just the hardest thing, because like we've spoken in some of the other episodes, we have so many voices going on, and they're not always like voices. Sometimes they're feelings, and sometimes, you know, is this a gut feeling, is this my anxiety? Like, it's just, you know, you just wish that you had like a little dictionary of like thoughts and sensations, and like what to believe. Like when this thought comes up, it's like, oh, that means this, and when this feeling happens, it means that you need this. But there's not always just like one fix for everything, is it?
No, but I guess it's like, you know, I think we're everyone that's watching, and us included, we're all on this journey of learning how to, you know, develop a relationship with ourselves. And if you think about any relationship, you know, maybe the first time you started dating someone, it's really hard to get a gauge, you know, on what they're saying and what is the intention behind their words and their actions. And it's really about that kind of, if you really care about someone, you just sort of take the time to get to know them. And I think we're being a little bit impatient with ourselves, that my wise voice needs to come out now when I need it, and my creator side needs to come out now when I need it, and like this bad voice needs to go away, and my inner critic needs to piss off. And we're very demanding of ourselves. And this journey, I think, that we're in when we're kind of learning how to understand ourselves, it requires a lot of patience, and it requires a lot of this development of just acceptance of whatever voice is kind of coming up and speaking to us, whether it is the inner critic that is blasting you. And it's not necessarily that we don't need to favor certain voices, but learn how to globally accept them all. And that's when we can integrate, you know, all these different parts of ourselves, because there are parts of us that we don't want around, that we disown, that we push away. And this is not the point. Like, we need to see all of the little parts of ourselves, my anxious self, my, you know, inner critic, my loving self, my wise self. I mean, we're all one big family inside our bodies. And it's not about playing favorites. It's not about like quietening some of them. It's really about learning how to accept this kind of crazy family, and giving everyone a bit of a voice, and saying, yeah, I hear you, you know, I see you, you know, I feel you, and doing that non-judgmentally as we can for all of them, which is, yeah, a huge challenge. But this is the internal family life that we're playing with here.
Makes me feel like I've got, you know, like the operatic part of Bohemian Rhapsody happening in my head at all times. That's just going to descend into like a chaotic rock and roll solo. And, you know, you wonder how such like disparate types of music and stories and lack of story can all come together and still make sense. Maybe we just all have to allow our inner minds to have their perfect Bohemian Rhapsody moment.
Totally. They've got to be the different characters that are sitting in the car, you know, like I call them monsters in my head sometimes, but you know, they're actually like cute little things that kind of pop up sometimes. Like, oh, there's Fred, and you know, there's Susan, and you know, they all have these different personalities. And I think when we get away from just kind of seeing them as like, well, I've got to fix them and I've got to change them and I've got to get rid of this one and make this one better. I mean, I think that's when we start to get into this perspective of not really accepting ourselves for who we are in our whole self, and seeing the whole family and the characters and getting to know them. You know, like I think everyone's families, you know, they've got their quirks and we're kind of stuck with them. So we have to learn how to accept them even if they annoy the shit out of us.
This is true. This is true.
Mm.
And we've got someone making a bit of a comment as well, that, you know, people maybe do feel like they're able to tap into this sixth sense of like awakening with this sort of greater time of reflection and silence and stillness. If, you know, you might have been able to use this time as an opportunity for that. And with a stronger intuition, it can be quite tricky to, I guess, get a handle of it, especially, you know, when you're not used to it. And once again, it can go back to the whole, you know, gut feeling, and maybe you start to learn to intuitively feel through things a little bit better. But again, you've still got, you know, the sort of more rational parts of your mind that really, I guess, maybe don't want to allow you to even believe that that part of you exists.
Totally. I think we want scientific answers for everything. We want dot points. We want steps that are, you know, they just kind of go in chronological order and you just follow them, and then ta-da, you feel happy and it's happily ever after, and we don't have to worry about everything. But, you know, addressing this type of idea that at the moment we have access to maybe our sixth sense or a bit more of the intuition, you know, I think it has always been there, but when we are asked to collectively pause and really slow down in our lives, first of all, I think there's going to be a lot more of all the voices. So you can just imagine, like, everyone's just like, what the hell? And, you know, that all the voices, the critic, the inner child, and all the different parts of us, I think are going, you know, everyone's just been, you know, just kind of chaotic. But the beauty in being able to be with, I think, the chaos is this idea that we can find this light through the darkness, and this idea that the light at the moment is our intuition, is our self-awareness, and it can feel a little bit, I think, intense to be so to have so much self-awareness to any of the voices or all of the voices at the moment. So you can imagine, you know, what it's like when someone shines a light in your eyes and you're just like, oh, it's, you know, like light's great, you know, in the dark, but when you get it right in your eyes, it's like bloody full on. And
Yeah.
it's a little bit like that right now. Everyone's just like seeing themselves in all their darkness and light and glory and beauty and pain and all the sorts of things. And it's just full on. It's like the intense drama bit of a movie. And, you know, we're sort of all just like, okay, you know, we need to kind of see it as that, like a, you know, have a bit of space from it and recognize that it is a challenging time right now, but there is a part of us also that can observe all of this that's going on. It is self-awareness, and it can be, you know, a bit much to see all of it right now. But what is the balm for self-awareness is this, I guess, this self-acceptance. You know, self-acceptance is like, if we're in the dark, it's like our warm, cuddly jumper that's in the dark, and that's, you know, we've got our flashlight and we've got our jumper, and these are our two tools at the moment that we can use, you know, to help guide us through these times.
Yeah, this is just one of those topics that's, again, like that never ending tunnel we could keep going down. But I think we've reached our time for our little episode today. Thank you everyone for tuning in and having a listen. We'll pop it up on our IGTV at the end of today, and we'll also pop it on our Facebook as well. But just want to say thank you, Mary, for all your beautiful wisdom. We always love hearing what you've got to say.
Thank you, Ash. Thank you everyone for watching.